do that. I was a week out of rehab when I started doing Jungle Fever, so I didn't really need makeup. Yeah, yeah. That was. I mean, the day they found me passed out on the kitchen floor, next day I was in rehab.
He is the immortal black legend of Hollywood. He is the king of the box office. With more than $28 billion in worldwide revenue. Mention Samuel L. Jackson, and you immediately think of the cold Nick Fury, the deadly Jules Winfield, an irreplaceable icon. But behind that spotlight, Samuel L. Jackson has always hidden dark truths. He once lay unconscious on the kitchen floor from a drug overdose. He was once dragged by a New York subway train, nearly losing his life. That is the Samuel L. Jackson who carries scars the audience will never see on screen. Hollywood almost lost a legend forever. This is not a movie script. This is real life. And this is the dark secret Hollywood never wants to mention. Go back to the 1950s in Chattanooga, Tennessee, a southern city in America, where skin color decided a child's fate. Samuel Leroy Jackson was born in 1948. From the moment he was born, Samuel was missing something. Every child needs a father. His father drowned in alcohol, abandoned the family, and died when Samuel was still very young. The boy grew up only with his mother, Elizabeth, and his grandparents. A poor family struggling for every meal in a society cruelly divided between black and white. In those years, Chattanooga was still under Jim Crow laws, where black and white children went to separate schools, used separate restrooms, and even sat in separate rows on the bus. That childhood was not only poor, but also full of shame. Samuel suffered from a severe stutter. In class, every time he wanted to speak, the syllables stuck in his throat, and his classmates burst into laughter. One year, Samuel chose silence almost the entire school year. The familiar picture, a skinny boy sitting quietly in the back of the classroom, avoiding others' eyes, swallowing words that never came out. That was the first wound of his spirit. No father, poverty, laughed at because of a stutter. But in that darkness, a spark appeared. Samuel discovered a secret to break the trap of speech, cursing. Every time the word stuck, he burst out a curse, and the strong emotion pushed the sound out. From then, he practiced turning the roughness in his speech into a weapon. This was not just a trick to overcome a stutter. It shaped the Samuel L. Jackson style later, words striking like a hammer, rapid, sharp, haunting. When Jules Winfield shouted in Pulp Fiction when Nick Fury threw out lines like bullets, that was the echo of the poor boy from Chattanooga. Outside the classroom, Samuel had to face a harsh reality. Black schools in Chattanooga were run down. The textbooks were hand-me-downs from white schools, the desks broken and shaky. The boy soon understood even knowledge was divided by skin color. All of that left deep marks in his memory, feeding him with both anger and a determination to survive. When others saw a quiet, withdrawn boy inside Samuel, there was already a steel toughness being forged. He learned to stand firm, learned that if he didn't protect himself, no one else would. That childhood could have crushed a child, but for Samuel, it forged a man who would never give up. The rebel student years, a fateful turning point. In 1966, Samuel Jackson set foot at Morehouse College, the prestigious school for young black men, and also the alma mater of Martin Luther King Jr. This was not just a school, but the cradle of the civil rights movement. The hallways buzzed with debates. The lecture halls echoed with calls for freedom. That fiery spirit quickly swept up the 18-year-old boy from Chattanooga. April 9, 1968. Atlanta was draped in mourning. Martin Luther King Jr. had just been assassinated a few days earlier. Tens of thousands gathered to say their final goodbye. Among that sea of people stood 19-year-old Samuel Jackson, working as an usher. Before his eyes were the most powerful faces in America: Coretta Scott King, Robert Kennedy, countless movement leaders. In his ears was the broken voice of Mahalia Jackson. In his heart was the choking grief of watching a symbol of an entire people fall. Samuel didn't just witness the funeral, he lived it. And in that moment, a seed of rebellion was planted in the young student's soul. A year later, that fire ignited. Samuel and a group of Morehouse students decided to act. They felt the school was too distant from reality, still producing the elite while neglecting the poor black community. They drafted a list of demands to create a Black Studies program, to add black faculty and board members to connect the school with the local community, and to improve scholarships for struggling students. Then they chose a shocking move occupying the Board of Trustees building. No knives, no sticks, just determination. But in 1969, that action was nothing short of a political bomb. The administration reacted swiftly. Jackson and many others were suspended. For most, it would have been the end. But for Samuel, it was the beginning of something new. During his suspension, he threw himself into local theater groups, discovering the stage for the first time. What seemed like disaster, being kicked out, opened a door to art where Jackson finally found his true voice. Stepping into art and the Broadway door, another turning point. After returning to Morehouse to complete his degree, Samuel Jackson joined Just Us Theater, a small troupe created by black students in Atlanta. This was where he first set foot on stage. Simple rehearsals, only a few dozen in the audience. But for the first time, Samuel felt a strange power when he spoke. The whole room went silent. It was also at Morehouse during a campus arts event that Samuel met LaTanya Richardson, a student at Spelman College right next door. LaTanya was a talented actress in student plays known for her strong, fearless style. Samuel later recalled, "I was impressed because she was smart, tough, and never backed down from me." From small rehearsals, the two quickly bonded. LaTanya became his stage partner, his teammate, and soon his lover. In 1976, after marrying LaTanya, Samuel decided to move to New York to test himself in a bigger arena. He joined the Negro ensemble company NEC, a professional troupe founded in 1967 famous for nurturing the best black actors. There, Jackson shared the stage with rising names like Denzel Washington and Adolph Caesar. At the same time, he worked with the New York Shakespeare Festival d'Art Public Theater, founded by Joseph Papp. In the late 1970s, he began landing notable roles in off-Broadway productions, like The Mighty Gents 1978 and Mother Courage and Her Children. Film was only barely opening its doors. Samuel appeared briefly in Ragtime 1981 and later as a stick-up man in Coming to America 1988. Small, unnoticed roles, but for him, they were the rehearsals for the day he would finally explode. New York was far from easy. Samuel and LaTanya rented a small apartment in Harlem, where rent was always a burden. By day, he rehearsed plays at night, he worked tables in bars, and by early morning, he was already back at the audition room. Some nights, he performed in front of just a few dozen people, dim lights shining over rows of empty seats. Yet Samuel shouted every line with all his energy, as if it was his last chance to prove he existed. But when the Broadway lights went dark, when the applause faded, Samuel L. Jackson stepped outside to face an invisible enemy, one that would drag him into the abyss. Dark Secret Addiction and the Abyss. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Samuel L. Jackson was still grinding on the New York stage. Wherever there was theater, he was there. But despite his talent, Jackson remained just another face in the crowd. No one remembered him. No one called his name outside of the supporting cast list. And just as his career stalled, a darkness crept into Jackson's life: cocaine and crack. New York in the 1980s was the capital of art, but also the capital of drugs. Behind the stage, packets of white powder were passed around. In bars after shows, crack smoke clouded the ceiling. Jackson, frustrated with never breaking out of small roles, decided to try. Just once, he thought. But that once slowly turned into chains that bound his life. He would later admit bluntly in an interview, "I could use drugs even while rehearsing lines. I thought I was in control. But the truth was, I wasn't in control of anything. I was just lying to myself." The decline. At first, Jackson still performed well. He hid his addiction by staying active on stage. But then it began to eat away at every part of his life. During rehearsals, he lost focus. His eyes bloodshot, his lines out of sync. Some nights he disappeared backstage, leaving his co-stars stranded in front of the audience. The whispers began to spread. Jackson's got a problem. His family paid the price too. LaTanya Richardson, his young wife juggling work and raising their daughter, had to watch her husband grow increasingly unstable. Sometimes Samuel came home exhausted, sleepless for nights on end. Their daughter Zoe, too young to understand, only knew to keep away from the father she loved because he often snapped without reason. LaTanya would later recall, I watched the man I loved disappear little by little. I knew if I didn't act, Samuel would die. Stress, disappointment, debt, it all pressed down on Jackson. The art world didn't open its arms to him. Drugs tightened their grip instead. The darkness nearly swallowed his entire life. One morning in 1991, the Jackson family kitchen became the scene of tragedy. Samuel lay unconscious on the floor, surrounded by drug paraphernalia and empty bottles. His wife and daughter were the first to find him. LaTonya screamed, shaking her husband, while Zoe cried out in terror. In that moment, Samuel L. Jackson, the man who would later become a Hollywood legend, stood on the edge between life and death. A few minutes later, and the world might have lost him forever. LaTonya had no choice left. She took her husband to rehab. It was a life or death turning point. Either Jackson stopped or he would die. In rehab, Jackson faced the real demon, himself. He described it as a time of pain, trembling, and torment. But it was also the first time he truly looked back on everything. The poverty of his childhood, the rebellious student years, the stage lights. And now a career almost gone. LaTonya never left his side, patient, firm, refusing to let him slip back into old habits. She was the one who pulled Jackson out of the darkness, held their family together, and saved an entire future. But in that darkness, a flicker of hope appeared. That light came from a fateful role in Jungle Fever. Just weeks after leaving rehab, an unexpected opportunity arrived. Spike Lee invited him to play Gator Purify, the crack-addicted brother in the 1991 film Jungle Fever. It wasn't just a role, it was his life projected on screen. Jackson didn't need to act. He only had to relive the darkest days he had just survived. I didn't have to act Gator. I just had to walk on set and live like I did in the worst days of my life. When Jackson appeared on screen, audiences were stunned. He was gaunt, wild-eyed, his voice trembling yet fierce. In the film, Gator steals from his mother to buy crack bags. His father for money dances frantically in a darkened apartment. For the audience, those scenes were cinema. For Samuel, they were painful memories of his own life. No one else could perform that truth except someone who had lived it. Crew members later recalled that even the set's security guards thought Jackson was a real addict who had wandered in. They tried to throw him out until Spike Lee stepped in. That's my actor. When Jungle Fever premiered, Hollywood was shocked. No one had ever seen a transformation so raw, so real. At the 1991 Cannes Film Festival, the jury even broke tradition. They created a brand new, never-before-existing category, Best Supporting Performance, just to honor Samuel L. Jackson. It was the first time in Cannes history that a prize was invented solely for one actor. Dark Secret created the legend. Without the addiction, there would be no Gator Purify. Without the overdose on that kitchen floor in 1991, there would be no performance that forced Cannes to break its rules. And without the time in rehab, Samuel L. Jackson might never have become Hollywood's most powerful actor. His dark secret wasn't a hidden scandal. It was his life-or-death battle with drugs. A shadow that nearly buried him, but also forged him into a legend. From then on, Jackson carried that darkness into every role. The fierce eyes, the growling voice, the overpowering presence. All of it bore the imprint of a man who had fallen to the bottom and lived again. Hollywood celebrated him as a star, but only Jackson and his family knew that spotlight was paid for in blood, in tears, and in a dark secret that almost killed him. But drugs weren't the only time death came knocking at Samuel L. Jackson's door. 3 years before collapsing in that kitchen in 1991, he had already nearly lost his life, right on the tracks of a New York subway. And that left scars that haunt him to this day. The subway accident and scars. Few know about December 1988, a freezing winter night in New York. The city glowed with neon lights and the familiar roar of subway trains. Samuel L. Jackson, then still a struggling actor carrying his prop bag, slowly made his way down to the platform after a small performance. He had no idea the next few minutes would become one of the most chilling moments of his life. The train doors were closing. Jackson tried to squeeze in, but before he could get inside, the doors slammed, trapping him. The train began to move. In that brief instant, Samuel was dragged along the platform. Passengers screamed. Some rushed to slam the emergency button. Just a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Every passing moment, death was right in front of him. Finally, the train screeched to a halt. Jackson was pulled out, lying motionless on the platform. His knee ligaments torn, his body bruised. Doctors later warned he needed surgery and months of physical therapy. 1 second slower, and he might never have stood on stage again. The accident forced Jackson to step away from work. He walked with crutches for months. And even after healing, the pain in his knee lingered for life, a permanent reminder that he had once been inches from death. Jackson later sued New York's Transit Authority. After years, he won the case and was awarded $540,000. The money helped him survive financially through the hard times, but it never erased the trauma. Jackson admitted to friends, "Every time I hear those subway doors close, I still get chills." The 1988 accident left not only physical scars, but a deep psychological wound, a brutal reminder of how fragile his life was. And perhaps, because of that, every time Jackson stepped on stage or in front of the camera afterward, he performed with an intensity that bordered on ferocious, because he knew with just one misstep, it could all vanish. Only a few years after the accident, he would face another wound, this time. Bitter invisible, the cold indifference of the Academy. The missed Oscar and career scars. In 1994, Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction premiered and instantly became a global phenomenon. Jackson's role as Jules Winfield, the hitman with the wild hair, the black suit, and the chilling biblical monologue, left the entire world stunned. Every line, every glance, every snap of his finger on the trigger carried the mark of a new cinematic icon. Critics raved, "This is the role of a lifetime. Jackson deserves the Oscar." Fans anxiously awaited the awards night. And when the name Samuel L. Jackson was announced in the nominations for Best Supporting Actor, everyone believed the Golden Statue was within his grasp. But when the envelope was opened, the victory went to Martin Landau in Ed Wood. The room erupted in applause. Jackson forced a smile, but his eyes fell silent. It was the moment when millions of viewers watching on television gasped, "They robbed Jackson of the Oscar." Years later, in an interview, Jackson did not hide his anger. "I knew I deserved it. But the Oscar wasn't for me. They didn't want to give it to a guy like me." That wasn't just a complaint. It was the raw truth about how Hollywood viewed a black actor, no matter how talented. And that bitterness burned inside Jackson for decades. After Pulp Fiction, Samuel L. Jackson went on to deliver one powerful performance after another. Carl Lee Haley in A Time to Kill, or Del Robbie in Jackie Brown Steven in Django Unchained. Every role set audiences on fire, yet the Oscars remained cold and indifferent. It wasn't until 2022, nearly 3 decades after Pulp Fiction, that Samuel L. Jackson was finally handed an honorary Oscar, a recognition that came far too late. On that stage, when Jackson held the golden statue in his hands, many whispered, "This is the award he should have received in 1994. But Jackson was no longer bitter. He smiled, raised the statue high as if to say, "I don't need their recognition to know my worth. I survived, I fought, and now I'm standing here." The 1988 subway accident left him with physical scars. The missed Oscar in 1994 left him with emotional ones. But together, those scars forged the Samuel L. Jackson we know today. He once sank into the depths, once missed the golden statue. But Samuel L. Jackson answered Hollywood in a way no one expected. He didn't just survive, he became the most powerful man at the box office, with more than $28 billion in worldwide revenue, a record never before seen in cinema history. The king of the box office, when Samuel L. Jackson redefined Hollywood. Pulp Fiction, the blast that shook the world. In 1994, Quentin Tarantino unleashed Pulp Fiction, and Samuel L. Jackson hit the screen like a storm. Jules Winfield, the philosophical hitman with blazing eyes, a crooked smile, and the Ezekiel 25:17 sermon carved himself into cinema history. That scene wasn't just iconic, it became a monument. The film grossed $214 million worldwide, and in that instant, Jackson transformed from a supporting name into a blazing A-list star. Before the heat cooled, he cemented his status with explosive performances. In Die Hard with a Vengeance, 1995, he stood alongside Bruce Willis, forming a box office duo that pushed revenues past $366 million. A year later, in A Time to Kill, 1996, Jackson embodied lawyer Carl Lee Haley, the father screaming in fury, "Yes, they deserve to die, and I hope they burn in hell." The line ripped through theaters, becoming unforgettable. The film grossed $152 million, and the film industry realized Samuel L. Jackson wasn't just a scene stealer, he had the power to carry an entire blockbuster. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, Nick Fury and the Billion-Dollar Leap. In 2008, he entered the Marvel Cinematic Universe with just a short after-credit scene in Iron Man. Few imagined that moment would change history. Nick Fury, the man behind the leather jacket and commanding gaze, became the glue that held the MCU together. From The Avengers, 2012, $1.5 billion Captain Marvel. 2019, $1.1 billion to Avengers Endgame. 2019, $2.7 billion Jackson appeared in a chain of billion-dollar blockbusters, delivering Marvel alone more than $18 billion at the box office. Without Fury, there would be no Avengers. And without Samuel L. Jackson, Nick Fury would never have become a cinematic icon. Guinness World Records, the record of a living legend. In 2011, Guinness World Records immortalized Samuel L. Jackson, the highest-grossing actor of all time. At that point, his films had already surpassed $7.4 billion. But that was only the beginning. By 2023, according to Box Office Mojo, the total gross of films he appeared in had reached $28 billion, a record that forced all of Hollywood to bow in recognition. He became the greatest money-making machine in film history. What makes Samuel extraordinary is not just the staggering revenue, it's his endless versatility. He can be the philosophical killer in Pulp Fiction, the reluctant hero in Die Hard, the Jedi Master, Mace Windu in Star Wars, or the powerful SHIELD director in Marvel. No matter the genre, art films, dramas, action blockbusters, or billion-dollar fantasy universes, Samuel L. Jackson always leaves his mark. Audiences can't mistake him for anyone else. One voice, one glance, and they know instantly that is Samuel L. Jackson. From the abyss to the pinnacle of legend. Once collapsed in his kitchen in 1991, once nearly killed on the New York subway, once ignored by the Oscars, Samuel rose from the shadows to become Hollywood's $28 billion man. He once said a simple but haunting line, "I never thought I'd be successful. I just thought as long as I'm alive, I'll keep acting." And surviving it all is what made Samuel L. Jackson an irreplaceable legend. Success can make a star shine bright, but only love and family can keep that fire alive. Samuel L. Jackson is a man saved by love and family. Love, family, and the pact of never letting go. For Samuel L. Jackson, Hollywood may be a dangerous place, but his marriage has always operated under a very different principle, an unspoken contract. He once put it plainly, "We have a pact, we'll stay together, unless one of us truly wants to walk away." And so far, nobody said that. That very philosophy of never letting go has kept Samuel and LaTanya Richardson's marriage strong for more than 4 decades, a rarity in Hollywood. LaTanya isn't just a wife, she's the director of the family. She manages the finances, organizes daily life. She's the only one unafraid to openly criticize Samuel even after he became a multi-billion-dollar star. Jackson has admitted, "She's the reason I stay grounded." She's not afraid to say, "You're wrong," and I need that. It was LaTanya who made the life-or-death decision in 1991, forcing Samuel into rehab. But more importantly, she didn't just save him, she kept their family from breaking apart. Many women in her place would have walked away. LaTanya chose to stay, chose to fight alongside her husband. Their small family, Samuel, LaTanya, and their daughter Zoe, became an unshakable foundation. Zoe grew up in Hollywood, but stayed away from the spotlight, choosing to work behind the scenes in film production, instead of becoming a celebrity kid. Jackson always says with pride, "She's proof that we raised her right no matter what." From family to community. Their love wasn't only for each other, but extended outward into society. In 2021, the Jacksons donated $5 million to Spelman College, the prestigious women's school where LaTanya once studied. It was the largest gift the college had ever received from an alum. That act wasn't just about money. It was an extension of their pact as a family. If they had survived, if they had endured the storms, then they owed it to leave behind a legacy not only for their daughter, but for future generations of Black women. Beyond that, Jackson became the face of One for the Boys, a global campaign raising awareness about men's cancer. Using his powerful voice, he urged, "Don't take your health for granted. Don't wait until it's too late." A marriage unlike any other in Hollywood. In a world where celebrity marriages often collapse after just a few years, Samuel and LaTonya's union is extraordinary. Not because they never faced hardship, but because they have one unbreakable rule: never give up. Samuel once said it bluntly, "Hollywood couldn't kill our marriage. Drugs couldn't either. If I lost everything tomorrow, LaTonya would still be the one standing beside me." Their love story isn't sweet like a fairy tale. It's sharp-tested and scarred. But that's exactly why it's real resilient and unshakably strong. But if at home, Samuel L. Jackson is the loyal husband and devoted father, once he steps into the Hollywood spotlight, he becomes a live wire. Blunt, fierce, and unfiltered, Jackson has repeatedly set the media ablaze with scandals, controversies, and explosive statements. Scandals and media firestorms. Samuel L. Jackson is famous for his mouth that knows no filter. SNL 2012, The F-Word Slip. In December 2012, Jackson appeared on the live comedy show Saturday Night Live SNL. During a sketch, he suddenly dropped the F-word right on national television. The audience gasped, social media exploded. Headlines the next morning blared, "Samuel L. Jackson swears live on air." With rumors swirling that NBC might ban him, Jackson immediately clapped back on Twitter. "I haven't been banned from anywhere. Everybody just relax. It was an accident. And if I were banned, I wouldn't care anyway." The controversy eventually faded, but it only cemented his image. Samuel L. Jackson is not someone you can tame. The N-word debate, defending Tarantino, calling out Joe Rogan. The most heated controversy surrounding Jackson centers on the N-word. In Pulp Fiction 1994 and Django Unchained 2012, Quentin Tarantino was harshly criticized for his character's frequent use of the word. But Jackson stood up to defend him. "If you're afraid of a word, you'll never get past the weight of it. Tarantino uses it to reflect the truth. And I don't see a problem with that." That statement split public opinion. Half supported him, arguing that Jackson had the right to speak on the issue from experience. The other half were outraged, insisting Tarantino as a white director should not abuse such a sensitive word. In 2022, Jackson once again stirred debate when addressing the Joe Rogan controversy. Old podcast clips resurfaced where Rogan had repeatedly used the N-word. When backlash erupted, Rogan apologized, claiming he had only used it in context. But Samuel L. Jackson hit back immediately. "Don't hide behind context." When he said it, it wasn't a character. It was him. And that's the problem. This time the public largely sided with Jackson. He drew a clear line between artistic language and careless speech in real life. Political and social statements. It didn't stop there. Samuel L. Jackson has often sparked controversy with his political remarks. He openly supported Barack Obama, early on criticized conservative politicians, and frequently spoke out about racial injustice. Once when asked why he supported Obama, Jackson answered bluntly, "I voted for him because he's black." That's it. The statement instantly became a sensational headline, fueling heated debates. But Jackson has never cared about pleasing everyone. He says what he believes regardless of the consequences. In interviews, he has repeatedly criticized Hollywood-condemned bias in awards shows and never hesitated to call out what he saw as injustice, a voice that can't be ignored. You can love him, you can hate him, but you can't ignore Samuel L. Jackson. He's someone who always forces a reaction, whether outrage or applause, but never indifference. That blunt honesty made Jackson a powerful voice of his time, reaching far beyond the screen. He is not just an actor, he is a presence in society, a figure who brings controversy, but also raw truth. Samuel L. Jackson is not a legend because he never fell. He became a legend because he did fall, because he was swallowed by darkness, and then came back stronger than ever. He leaves behind a double legacy on screen, hundreds of unforgettable roles, tens of billions in global box office characters that will live forever. Off-screen, the image of a man who confronted his own scars and turned them into strength to inspire others. His story is not just the story of cinema. It is a reminder to anyone who has ever fallen. Scars are not the end, they are proof that you survived. Hollywood almost lost Samuel L. Jackson more than once. But it is precisely those scars, that darkness, that made him immortal.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.